Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Military Forces Unleashed. Today we're diving into one of NATO's biggest exercises of the year, Steadfast Defender 2024. It's a massive show of military force designed to keep Europe secure. But as usual, it's not all smooth sailing. We'll look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and even a few surprises along the way. From cyber warfare to tanks stuck in bureaucratic traffic jams, this one has it all. So buckle up, we've got a lot to cover. Steadfast Defender 2024, NATO's latest mega exercise, is the sort of military spectacle that makes defense contractors rub their hands together and politicians post triumphant social media selfies. It's an event where NATO's collective muscle gets flexed. Well, some muscles more than others. And the alliance reassures itself that it's still the world's premier defense pact, even if some of its members can't quite keep up with the cardio. Held in the North Atlantic, Steadfast Defender brings together over 30,000 personnel from 21 countries, along with hundreds of tanks, aircraft, and ships. The goal? To practice defending Europe from a simulated invasion that's essentially a thinly veiled version of what an actual Russian assault might look like. After all, NATO's primary job since 1949 has been to keep Europe safe from threats to its east. But behind the flashy displays of unity and firepower, a closer look reveals a few cracks in the armor, both figuratively and literally. The scenario is straightforward enough. Assume a fictional enemy, who just happens to speak Russian, is threatening NATO's southern and eastern flanks. The exercise focuses on rapid reinforcement and defense of critical infrastructure in Europe. In a real crisis, NATO would need to deploy tens of thousands of troops across the continent and across the Atlantic Ocean in a matter of days. Steadfast Defender is supposed to simulate just that, but while it's easy to get caught up in the grandeur of such an operation, one has to wonder, is NATO prepared for the realities of modern warfare, where cyber attacks, misinformation campaigns, and hypersonic missiles are just as dangerous as tanks rolling across borders? For one thing, NATO's command and control systems are aging. Sure, we have some shiny new jets like the F-35s buzzing around, but much of the infrastructure NATO relies on for communication and coordination was built when people still thought the Berlin Wall was going to be around forever. In past exercises, NATO has struggled with basic logistics, like moving troops and supplies quickly across Europe, a continent known for its complicated political borders and not-so-great roads. One of the most underappreciated aspects of exercises like Steadfast Defender is the Herculean task of moving all those tanks, planes, and soldiers. It's easy to imagine that a modern military can snap its fingers and have thousands of troops appear on the battlefield like some sort of real-life Call of Duty respawn. But the reality is far messier. Moving equipment across Europe is like playing a game of who wants to fill out this border permit. And no one ever wants to. The European Union might boast open borders for people and trade, but military convoys still face all sorts of bureaucratic hurdles when crossing from one country to another. And let's not even get started on the aging rail systems that most NATO forces rely on to transport heavy armor. Military planners love trains because tanks are, surprise, not great at long road trips. However, European rail networks, much like NATO itself, are a patchwork of different systems, speeds, and occasionally missing tracks. During past exercises, entire brigades have been delayed because someone forgot to file the correct customs paperwork, or a rail bridge wasn't strong enough to support an M1 Abrams tank. These sorts of logistical nightmares might sound funny in peacetime, but they could be catastrophic in an actual conflict where speed is the difference between victory and disaster. In Steadfast Defender, NATO has also put a greater focus on cyber warfare. Because in 2024, if you're not hacking something, are you even trying? The exercise features simulations of cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, communications, and even weapon systems. The idea is to prepare for a future where bombs and bullets are only part of the threat. Yet, for all the focus on cyber, NATO's own digital infrastructure isn't exactly state-of-the-art. Many of the systems NATO uses to communicate between member countries are vulnerable to attack. In fact, recent reports suggest that NATO has been the target of numerous cyber intrusions from state and non-state actors. The worst part? Many of these systems were built in an era when the biggest cyber threat was someone stealing floppy disks, and upgrading them to handle modern threats is both costly and time-consuming. Add to that the fact that NATO is a coalition of 31 countries, each with their own cyber capabilities, or lack thereof, and you start to get a sense of how complicated it is to defend against a coordinated digital assault. In a real conflict, the first thing a capable adversary would do is launch a series of devastating cyber attacks, crippling communications and sowing chaos before a single shot is fired. One of the less glamorous but equally important aspects of Steadfast Defender is the focus on troop morale and joint training. NATO soldiers are supposed to work together seamlessly in battle, regardless of nationality or language. In theory, this sounds great. In practice, it can be a bit of a nightmare. For starters, not all NATO forces are created equal. The US and the UK have some of the most well-funded and well-trained troops in the world. Meanwhile, some of the newer member states are still struggling with outdated equipment and limited budgets. This creates a situation where certain units are essentially playing catch-up, trying to keep pace with the heavy hitters. Then there's the issue of language. NATO's working language is English, but that doesn't mean every soldier speaks it fluently. During past exercises, miscommunication between units has led to everything from minor delays to outright tactical blunders. The Alliance has made great strides in improving interoperability, but language barriers remain a persistent issue. The air and naval components of Steadfast Defender are, on paper, some of the most impressive parts of the exercise. Dozens of advanced fighter jets, surveillance planes, and warships come together to practice complex maneuvers and joint operations. But even here, things aren't always as smooth as they seem. NATO's naval forces, for instance, have struggled with maintenance issues. Many of the Alliance's ships are aging, and keeping them operational for exercises like Steadfast Defender requires a tremendous amount of effort. In 2023, several NATO warships were forced to sit out a major exercise due to technical problems. The same could very well happen again in 2024. On the air front, while NATO boasts some of the world's most advanced fighter jets, including the American F-35 and the Eurofighter Typhoon, there have been issues with pilot training and readiness. In fact, recent reports indicate that many NATO air forces are facing a shortage of trained pilots, which means some of those shiny jets could end up sitting on the tarmac instead of in the air where they belong. Steadfast Defender 2024, for all its pomp and pageantry, is a stark reminder that modern warfare is as much about logistics, cyber defense, and political coordination as it is about guns and tanks. NATO, while still a formidable force, faces significant challenges in these areas. From outdated infrastructure and bureaucratic hurdles to cyber vulnerabilities and maintenance woes, the Alliance has a lot of work to do if it wants to be truly prepared for a 21st century conflict. But hey, at least they're trying. For every tank stuck at a border checkpoint or ship sidelined by a maintenance issue, there are thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen working tirelessly to make sure NATO is ready for whatever comes next. And if that means dealing with a few logistical nightmares along the way, so be it. After all, as any good general will tell you, war is hell, but planning for war? That's a whole different kind of nightmare. And that's a wrap on Steadfast Defender 2024. As we've seen, NATO's got the firepower, but sometimes the real battle is in the details, whether it's moving troops, navigating bureaucracy, or keeping up with modern cyber threats. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below on what you think NATO's biggest challenge is in today's world. Until next time, folks, stay sharp and stay ready. This is Military Forces Unleashed, signing off.